Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Time-Crossed Lovers in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 26, Clearing the Air. Despite Suthis' hope, Byleth's conversation with Dimitri in front of the throne hadn't improved their situation. Their relationship remained strained, but that was likely because she hadn't seen much of Dimitri since then. Outside of battle, Byleth hasn't had any personal interactions with him at all. I'm sorry, talking it out didn't help. Neither of you were in the right headspace for it. Still, there must be some compromise the two of you can agree upon. Perhaps if you were both more available and had cooler heads, something could be worked out. Though given the boy is a king, that might be difficult given the war. They just have such opposing views on almost everything. Dimitri wants her to understand and stop denying herself the happiness they could share, while she wants him to stop being delusional. Is delusional the right word? He keeps feeding her the same lines and expects things to be different. They do not live in one of Ingrid and Ash's books. Happy endings are not guaranteed. Maybe they are still in love, maybe they are not, but Dimitri is right about one thing: her happiness is important. Byleth wants to be happy one day, though that happiness might not involve Dimitri. He's just so single-minded. Sometimes that persistence and tenacity is admirable, but right now it's annoying. Dimitri can only fathom one kind of life, a life that she's almost certain she wouldn't enjoy. Byleth hadn't wanted to be the archbishop, but wasn't given much choice there. How would being a queen be any better? It can't be that bad. They'd be stuck in the castle all the time, not allowed to go anywhere. Even if Dimitri respects her as a warrior, most others will not share that sentiment. To many, her only purpose would be to produce royal heirs, and Byleth isn't even sure if she wants children. Furthermore, she wasn't raised for nobility. No life is easy, and Byleth simply doesn't have the tools to navigate the difficulties of that life. Then there are the rumors that are sure to circulate. You know better than to put stock into such idle chatter. After hearing about her low birth and whatever insults people come up with constantly, all the time, every day, Byleth is certain Suthis would change her tune. I see your point. If you are told something enough times, it becomes all too easy to believe it. Having to stay in the castle all the time, with only duties neither of us understand nor care for to occupy us, I can imagine we'd both feel quite restrained. It's just all so tiring. Part of Byleth wants to just curl up and sleep for another 5 years. Tempting as that may sound, I wouldn't advise you to do so. We could wake up and find the world changed for the worse again. Probably. For now, stay clear of the boy. When you've both cooled down though, I think it would be wise to check on him. He loves you, and the way you've been ignoring him has a negative impact on his already fragile mind. It was odd to think of Dimitri as fragile. She'd literally seen him crush skulls with his hands, but he was susceptible to mental attacks. That plus his worryingly low opinion of himself was not the best of combinations. Lady Byleth, a voice said to their right, catching their attention. Byleth looked and saw Didu standing there awkwardly holding a covered tray. Didu bowed as best he could with the tray in his arms. I apologize for interrupting your thoughts, but His Majesty has been refusing to sleep or eat lately. He claims that he's too busy with paperwork to take breaks. He looks ashamed. I have been unsuccessful in convincing King Dimitri to take care of himself. I was hoping that you might have better luck. I have prepared chamomile tea and sweet buns. Please ask His Majesty to take a break and eat. Byleth isn't sure if that is the greatest idea. She and Dimitri aren't on the best of terms right now, and her asking him to take better care of himself might backfire. He could decide to work harder to prove himself or something. Or just to spite her. I doubt that the boy has a tendency to perk up when he's with you. I see no problem with you trying to convince him to take care of himself like a normal person. Please, Lady Byleth, Didu begged, he's been holed up for days. His Majesty went to look at the inventory, came back upset, and hasn't stopped working since. That was days ago. What he is doing is not good for his health. All right, I will try. She reaches out to take the tray of food from Dimitri. But I make no promises. Didu bows again. She wishes he wouldn't do that. Of course, thank you for your assistance. Byleth spends longer than she should hesitating to enter Dimitri's tent. Hurry it up. The quicker you go in, the quicker you can leave and get back to your moping. Rude. But Suthies did have a good point, she might as well get this over with. Like Didu had said, Dimitri was buried in paperwork. He didn't even look up when she came in. I've already told you Didu, I'll eat later, I just need to work for a little longer. Please leave me be. He still wasn't looking up. That might work with Didu, but I'm not him. Byleth put down the tray on an empty table. Honestly, I get that your work is important, but you are worrying Didu, and I suspect the others. A cracking sound resounded through Dimitri's workspace. Dimitri was looking at her in shock with a snapped quill in his clutches. Ink was getting all over his hand. Darn it, why does this always happen? Dimitri was frantically trying to clean his hand with a rag, while a blush spread across his face. If they weren't in the middle of a fight, Byleth would probably find him adorable. Once his hand was as clean as he could get it, Dimitri looked up at her. Byleth, what are you doing here? Byleth kept her face carefully blank, she did not want to risk starting another fight. Didu was worried about you. He didn't think you'd eat if he asked, so he came to me. Now that she saw him, Dimitri did look a little pale. How many meals had he skipped? She had hoped that Dimitri would have kicked these kinds of bad habits, but clearly this was one part of him that had not changed. Oh. For some reason he looked a little sad. Well, I thank you for your kindness, but I am fine. Byleth isn't so sure. When was the last time you ate? Dimitri looked at her in confusion. Wha? Just answer the question please. His silence was enough of an answer. She shook her head in exasperation. Outside of war meetings Didu is the only person who has seen you in days. He said you haven't been eating, I'm inclined to believe him over you. I have a lot of work to do. Putting it off could be detrimental to everyone. Dimitri sighed and walked over to investigate the tray. Since you are here though, would you like to enjoy the tea with me? He looks so hopeful. I remember us sharing a pot of chamomile quite often before. I thought you said you were too busy to eat. Dimitri shook his head. I'm trying to find common ground so we can figure things out. I know you likely think I'm getting caught up in the past, but that is not what my intentions are. She highly doubts that. Byleth feels so tired. I don't want to fight Dimitri, but I just don't see a happy ending here. It's a nice dream, but just because Dimitri wants something doesn't mean he can have it. Dimitri was silent for a moment before he began to speak softly. Maybe we don't know about each other as well we used, but we could change that. And as for our respective stations, we found a way around it once. I know you're not the Archbishop, but surely we can find some other way to grant you prestige. What is he? Oh right, he doesn't remember. That's not what happened. What do you mean? Dimitri asked, confused. Byleth took a deep breath. We were keeping our engagement a secret. The other former Blue Lions knew, but that was about it. Why? At first, we just wanted to wait until things had calmed down after your coronation, but some of your counselors and other nobles didn't think too highly of me because of my background. Byleth sighed. Faerghus is rather old-fashioned, so we decided to wait and try to figure out ways to combat the inevitable pushback. Dimitri was shaking. In sadness, fear, anger, Byleth wasn't sure. And did we? Were we able to figure out a way to be together? He grabbed one of her hands and entwined their fingers. Please, beloved, tell me we came up with some kind of plan. He looked desperate. Byleth shook her head and turned away. She didn't want to see Dimitri's reaction to her news. We never really got the chance. Our invasion on Shambhala was only a few months later. We got rather good at sneaking around together though. While it had its fun moments, they had both been worried. Is that why you've been so pessimistic about us? We couldn't do it then, so it can't be done now. Dimitri moved to embrace her. If so, I understand, but I still don't want to give up. We can figure out if we truly love each other or if we are clinging to the past. If it is the former, we can work through any obstacles together. Dimitri buries his face in her neck. It doesn't feel like my emotions regarding you have changed. Your smile still mesmerizes me, seeing you still makes my heart pound and stomach flop in the best of ways. Just being around you makes me feel lighter. He nuzzles into her skin. I still love to watch you eat because of how happy you look, and I adore how content you appear while fishing. Why can't it always be like this? Dimitri has only been holding Byleth for a few seconds and he already feels so much better. All the little aches that developed from sitting for too long had washed away at her touch. How had they gotten to this point? How had their relationship deteriorated to the point that holding the woman he loved was a pleasure he had to surprise her with to obtain? Was Byleth right? Had they changed? Dimitri hadn't been able to get the thought out of his head since she brought it up. At first, he avidly denied it. Sure, they were growing as people, but they were still basically the same. The more he thought about it though, the more he could see it. He had gotten more pragmatic and Byleth had changed too. Her changes were subtle, her seemingly emotionless facade helped with that, but they were there. Off the battlefield she had a distant aura about her, like just being around people was painful and draining. On the battlefield she was more ruthless than he remembered her being. Byleth was never cruel, however, there was a new harshness to her technique. Maybe it wasn't new, and he had just been too blind to see it. Dimitri had hoped that burying himself in work would distract him from his intrusive thoughts, but it didn't have the desired effect. How could he not have noticed how the others avoided Byleth? They were never rude, at least not that he saw, but they were not exactly welcoming either. In hindsight it was a rather large request to ask them to make friends with someone who had decimated half of their army before. Looking back his friends had noticeably changed. They were different people compared to the ones Byleth got to know. Felix had not demanded a spar out of her at all and no one sought her out for a meal or expedition either. He'd even overheard Annette and Ash talking about how creepy she was when he went to check on the supplies the other day. How Byleth seemed to know their movements and the like so well, despite how little interaction they had. They even discussed the ridiculous notion that she was a ghost or a demon who could see into people's souls. It had left him feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness. Dimitri hadn't left his tent since. His friends used to love Byleth and now they tried to avoid being in her presence. Dimitri cannot imagine how isolating that must be. Though he does understand to an extent how it feels to have someone you love to want to avoid you. It is different though. Byleth remembers everything and has spent time with him. There is no malice or anything truly negative behind her actions. Then there is the last thing Byleth said. Why would being a queen make Byleth miserable? Even taking himself out of the equation, she would get a lot. A nice place to live, a regular supply of good food, a safe place to sleep, and while he is sure it would take a little while, he knows that the citizens would come to adore her. What about that would make Byleth unhappy? It all sounded pretty nice to him. Because that is not all it would be. She'd have to deal with responsibilities she has no training for and no experience in. The nobility would not make things easy for her either. If Byleth was telling the truth about their previous engagement, then the nobles in his own court would desire to make her life more difficult. Not only that, but Byleth would be restricted in her movements. She was raised as a mercenary and is therefore used to constantly moving around and going wherever she wants. Being confined to a castle, or even a capital must seem so stifling to her. Not only that, but Byleth had never been fond of attention, preferring to be unseen in the background. Dimitri can remember how uncomfortable she was with the prospect of being archbishop and how much she disliked how people fawned over her because of it. After they retook her dyad from Cornelia, Byleth had refused to travel the streets with her head uncovered. She didn't enjoy the attention she got from the citizens. Dimitri had assumed that she'd likely grown to at least tolerate the attention and position. He truly was a fool. Realizing how blind he had been, was a humbling experience. Despite that though, he still wants her at his side. Dimitri's desperate hope is still that they can eventually get married and live their lives together. It feels right to hold her and Byleth still smells so good. Until he met her, he did not realize how lovely smoky campfires smelled. Dimitri never wants to let go. He knows logically that they cannot stay like this forever, but it would be wonderful if they could. Please let me go, Dimitri. Byleth, whose arms had been at her sides, was now pushing against his chest. I am not comfortable with you hugging me and would like you to stop. Dimitri is hasty to comply. Embracing her had been very improper. In love or not, they were fighting and Byleth was upset with him. He should refrain from touching her until she indicates her acceptance of it. Apologies, he said with a bow. Byleth's face was still blank. Things would be so much easier if she'd stop defaulting to the mask of the Ashen Demon. I have been considering our last conversation and I would appreciate it if you would stay to share a cup of tea so we can continue it. Now that they've both had time to calm down, maybe they can finally talk things out. Byleth hesitates and her eyes turn toward the exit. Please Byleth, I do not want us to fight either. They both lost their tempers last time, which truly was a shame after Suthies went through the trouble of ensuring they could talk in peace. Talking now might be our best bet of clearing the air at the very least. All right. Relief washed over him as they both took a seat. Maybe they could work things out. The silence was deafening, and Dimitri feels foolish. For all his talk about wanting to end their fight and clear the air, he has no idea what to say. He really needs to plan these kinds of things better. In his defense, he hadn't been expecting to see Byleth, but still. Neither of them had touched the tea, and even though bringing him food was Byleth's purpose for being here, he hadn't eaten anything either. They were both staring at the tea set and sweet buns, without saying a word. It was getting awkward. Maybe he just needs more time to plan things out. I will be called back to Fhirdiad soon for some business with a stop at the monastery after. Byleth finally looks back at him. I would like you to go with me. As my employer, you can deploy me where you want. If you require extra protection, Geralt will have no issue with it. Right, as her mercenary captain, he would have to run this by her father. I would prefer for you to want to go yourself. Dimitri sighed. I've been putting a lot of thought into what you've told me about the various things that have been making you unhappy. He clenches his fists. I am foolish for not having noticed anything. You were right to have been angry about me not seeing your patterns of behavior. That being said, I unfortunately need more time to come up with an appropriate response. That is fine, it was probably a lot to take in. Byleth shrugged. I didn't tell you about it because I wanted you to fix everything, I told you because you deserved to know all the reasons behind my actions. I see. Byleth tapped her fingers on the table. On the subject of accompanying you to Fhirdiad and Garreg Mach, I am a bit wary. Lady Rhea could see me, and I am supposed to stay away from her. He hadn't considered that. But if you can ensure that doesn't happen, I will go with you. She looked him in the eyes. Provided my father agrees, of course. Dimitri felt himself smile. I shall endeavor to keep you out of Lady Rhea's sight. Maybe there was hope for them yet. Chapter 27, Return to Fhirdiad. When they reached Fhirdiad, all Dimitri wanted to do was show Byleth its beauty. He knows that he showed her before, but he has no memory of it, and is likely not exactly the same given the war is playing out differently and his reign as king began much earlier. Unfortunately, practically as soon as he and his escort entered Fhirdiad, he was sequestered away for meetings. There was always at least one noble who needed to discuss something. Some he could understand, the war had been impacting the lives of everyone and it was showing. There were food shortages, increased bandit attacks, roads were unsafe to travel, the list was never ending. Other meetings were less important. In those, the nobles who called for them were clearly only interested in maintaining or evaluating their standing. It wasn't truly a surprise, with the Western lords deposed of, there were power gaps to fill, and Dimitri did need to appoint people to look over the territories. Even though they could not go out and enjoy the sights together, Dimitri still made time for Byleth. Whenever he could, he'd invite her for a meal or a spar. It was wonderful to spar with her again in earnest. Dimitri was not as confident with his combat skills as he once was. Although he had had both of his eyes again for years, he sometimes forgot about that mid-battle, and it had caused problems more than once. His beloved was the only one who he could even begin to explain that to. She would usually accept his invitations, but her guard was up the entire time. While Dimitri understood that she was in unfamiliar territory, he did not see why she felt the need to be on alert all the time. That was until the nobles started making comments. It infuriated him. During the meetings there were frequent remarks about hiring more knights to better guard him, worry about his reputation, and concern for how he had been spending his free time. The fact none of them were subtle about the looks they were sending Byleth's way made what they really meant very clear. "Dimitri, are you okay?" He looked up from his dinner to see Byleth looking at him. She was working through her third plate, while he'd barely started his first. "I know you can't taste it, but you still need to eat." Byleth tilted her head to the side. "Are you not hungry, or is something bothering you?" "Apologies, I let my mind wander." Byleth is likely aware of what is being said about her. "You are correct, I need to eat." The food tasted like ash in his mouth, but that isn't out of the ordinary. It did nothing to brighten his mood though. "What's bothering you?" Byleth had finished eating and was watching him. "I don't think glaring at the food like it's insulted you will make things any better." He should just tell her, communication was important in relationships and lack of it hadn't done them any favors recently. "I wish you could join me for the meetings." He was a coward. "With your keen mind I am certain things would run more smoothly and I feel bad about you just sitting around waiting for me finish." She had come at his request after all, and it was horrible of him to leave her alone so often. Byleth shrugged. "I doubt I'd enjoy being in those meetings, going to the library or training grounds for the day suits me much better." "Besides," Byleth said bringing a hand to her chin, "I doubt your advisors and other nobles would appreciate someone so low-born sitting near them." So, she was aware of things. Getting confirmation was good, he supposes. Not that Dimitri was surprised. Byleth was observant and had dealt with some of this before everything had changed. It still did not make things right. "Try not to let the gossip get to you." Her voice was soft. "You had to have known I would be a popular topic amongst the people here." Byleth, as always, was right. If he wants them to eventually get married, Dimitri would need to find ways to combat this, not dwell on the negatives of it. He would just need to find a way to either get them to stop talking or change their views on Byleth. "Out of curiosity, what did you do today while I was stuck in meetings?" Maybe a change in topic would lighten the mood. Dimitri wanted to enjoy his time with his beloved and not focus on the negative. "I hope you were not too bored." "I spent the day on the training grounds." Byleth began to stack her plates. "Some knights showed up while I was there, but I dealt with it." Dimitri could feel a chill run up his spine. "What happened?" "If I need to I will dot." Byleth's face hardened. "I said I took care of it. Do you not trust me?" "Of course, I trust you. It's just I worry, and if anything were to happen to you Dimitri knows she is fine." Byleth is literally sitting across from him and doesn't have a scratch on her. Not only that, but his knights were not beasts. They would not seriously hurt someone unprovoked, especially if that someone was here at his behest. Byleth is also one of the most skilled fighters he knows. She'd decimated half his army before while avoiding killing where she could. Still, if something were to happen, he is certain he would not be able to take it. Even if the issue wasn't injury, Byleth could still decide that she disliked being in Fhirdiad itself. If the people were cruel to her, that was a very real eventuality. She already felt uneasy being here and disliked the cold climate. He didn't need any more points against him. "I know Dimitri." Byleth leaned back in her seat. "It really wasn't anything either. A couple of them approached me, said some things that don't matter, and challenged me to a spar." Her mouth tilted into a slight smile. "I beat them all into the ground and now they all want to know how I did it. Kind of like how Felix used to be now that I think about it." It warmed Dimitri's heart to see her smile again, no matter how small. "I am glad to hear the situation ended so favorably for you." Dimitri looked down at his now empty plate. Usually after they had both finished eating, they would separate for the night or go to the library together. They had different tastes in books. He preferred to read about infrastructure, battle tactics, and other similar subjects while Byleth favored fiction, though lately she had been reading history books. If he was still busy, he would make it a point to bring his paperwork with him. It was always easier to get through when Byleth was close. Regardless, it was nice to sit with her in a warm and calm environment. It was always especially enjoyable when a fire was lit for them. He was, unfortunately, too tired for that tonight but did not wish to say goodbye quite yet. "Byleth, tomorrow I plan on walking around the city to see how things are running. Would you like to join me? It might do them both some good to get out of the castle." You brought me here to serve as protection, did you not? Going with you makes sense. Dmitri felt his face fall. She was not incorrect, but he would much rather Byleth simply want to walk around the city with him. He still fervently wished they could do more things like regular couples. Even ignoring Byleth's past resistance to the idea, they had so little time for such things. Still, if Byleth was agreeing to accompany him, it was a start. Dmitri mustered up a smile. Thank you, I look forward to spending time with you. When Byleth woke up, she was near freezing. She was under piles of blankets. How could she still be so cold? I do not know, but I do not find it pleasant. Stoke the fire or something, please. Byleth hurried to do just that. It was even colder outside of the bed. How can people live here? It isn't even winter, it should not be this cold. It is rather early in the morning, it'll get warmer as the day goes on. And we have to go out in the city today, I am not looking forward to the temperatures outside. Suthies signed. Though I imagine the boy is looking forward to your excursion. At least the weather does not seem to affect him. Dmitri grew up here, he likely doesn't even notice. They'll just have to bear with it until they leave. It will be a nice change of pace. The training grounds and library are all well and good, but I am beginning to get bored with both. Byleth has to agree, but it's not like there's anything else for them to do, unless Suthies wants them to spend even more time in their assigned room. It's not like their research is getting anywhere. No, staying here all day wouldn't be any better. About the room though, what could the boy have been thinking, putting you here? He had to know it would invite talk. Byleth had naively assumed she'd be put up in a barracks or possibly an empty servant's quarters. Instead, Dmitri had put her in the guest wing. By her guess, the room was meant for visiting nobles. She really didn't see the point. It was much bigger than she needed and was filled with luxuries she didn't even use. Dmitri probably just wanted them to be comfortable. I can appreciate that, but the rumors it invites do not help with our comfort. He probably hadn't considered that. Abruptly there was a knock at the door. Byleth went to answer it and found a couple of maids carrying trays of food. We apologize if we woke you, but His Majesty sent us with your breakfast, one said. She walked in when Byleth moved out of the way and put the tray on one of the room's small tables. The other maid followed her college and gave Byleth a sealed envelope. King Dmitri ordered we also give you this. The woman seemed excited about something, and she giddily eyed the note. Read it before they go. If need be, they can send along a reply. Byleth tore open the letter and read its contents. It was a short note requesting that she meet him at the castle gate in an hour. So, they were leaving early. It is a good thing Dmitri had provided her with a heavy coat when they first arrived. She looked up and saw both maids looking at her expectantly. You can tell King Dmitri that I will do as requested. Why did they have to go so early? Couldn't it have waited until it was warmer? Of course. The maids curtsied, looking oddly disappointed. Enjoy your food. One of them stepped forward. If needed, we can assist you in getting ready. Byleth tilted her head to the side. As I've said before, I am not a child, I do not need help to put on clothing. She had always found it strange that nobles needed help with that kind of thing. In their defense, the clothing nobility wears tends to be more complicated. As a result, I assume an extra set of hands makes the process easier. The maids left, but Byleth could hear them giggling through the door. The boy is making it frightfully obvious that something is going on between you two. The servants are probably bursting with gossip about how the king's lover is a mercenary. Even if he has never come near this room. Dmitri has never been the most subtle of people. He might want to learn if he doesn't want outside interference. Unfounded gossip it may be, but it is only a matter of time before the wrong person catches wind of it. Byleth couldn't help but agree. Dmitri was so excited. He was walking the streets of his home with Byleth at his side, and she looked adorable bundled up in the coat he procured for her. He made sure it was fur-lined as she wasn't used to Fhirdiad's colder climates, and Dmitri selected a pink one because he knew she liked the color. They were not exactly going on a leisurely walk, but he wouldn't complain about any time he got to spend with his beloved. They just had to stick to the schedule he's written earlier, and everything would be fine. Hopefully, Byleth wouldn't get too bored during the parts of the walk where he'd have to focus on work. He knows Byleth doesn't need a lot of attention, but Dimitri doesn't want to even risk having her feel neglected. Where are we going to look? Byleth wasn't looking at him, instead she was focused on scanning their surroundings. Dimitri has to admire her work ethic. She has always been diligent, and as she is technically working as his guard, that is information she needs to know. There are a few places I need to look into, but it will take us all around the city. If you get hungry, please tell me, there are many places to grab something, and I am eager to show you. Dimitri took out a parchment and looked at his notes. We need to go to the local church, apothecary, check on the sewage system, the Fhirdiad School of Sorcery, and various things of that nature. He handed her his list, so she could see for herself. Byleth looked over the list before handing it back. I am not very familiar with the city streets, it has been a long time since I walked them, so I will have to stick close while you are working. Dimitri couldn't restrain his smile. He was hoping for that. I see no issues with walking next to you. The sewage systems were running without issue, and besides the occasional explosion the current semester at the School of Sorcery was going well. There were apparently a number of promising students. Maybe if things worked out between them, Byleth could take up a teaching job there. Magic wasn't her preferred method of fighting, but his beloved was skilled in both faith and reason. Despite his low resistance and aptitude, she'd helped him learn thunder to great effect. She would probably be happier doing that than sitting around all day waiting for him to have some free time or working through paperwork she doesn't care about. The regular schoolhouse had nothing to report, though it did remind him of what Byleth told him when they were in Leicester. Perhaps speaking with a bishop or another official at the local church about education would be a good idea. If churches in rural areas were where the regular citizens got most of their education, they are bound to have some ideas to share. I just want everyone to have access to a good education. That one thing can eventually bring about so many positive changes to the people's life. It is so nice to be able to share this with Byleth. I know that giving people more education is no guarantee of anything, but I believe it is a good place to start. Byleth nodded. She'd been rather subdued since they left the castle, so it was nice to see her responding. It's a decent place to begin, but you have to keep in mind that just because better education would potentially be available, it does not mean people will take advantage of it. What do you mean? If you want this idea to pan out, you need to make the people also think education is important. Byleth surveyed their surroundings again. If there's work that needs to be done, most people would prefer their children be around to help, not off learning about things they might not think are important. Dimitri hadn't considered that. So, what you are saying is that making education more readily available is not enough. I must also make others think it is worthwhile. Exactly. I never had a formal education, my lifestyle wouldn't have supported it. Byleth shrugged. My exact upbringing is not very common, but there are many others that similarly make going to a regular school seem like an inconvenient idea at best. This is one of the things Dimitri loves when it comes to speaking with Byleth. She is always so insightful, and she comes up with things he would not think of on his own. I will keep that in mind. Byleth is quiet as they walk to the church. Dimitri knows that she has never been that interested in the religion itself, but he hopes she at least finds the architecture interesting. Maybe afterward they can stop to get a snack. His beloved always looks happiest when she is eating. What would she like best? It should probably be something warm, while Byleth can certainly handle colder temperatures. She has never enjoyed them. Eating something roasted or a freshly baked good might make her feel better. As they continue down the streets they pass through a busy market. Dimitri counts himself lucky when he notices several food stands, all of which appeared to have steaming merchandise. Byleth has a large appetite, perhaps he could get her something now and on their way back. Byleth, Dimitri sees her tense. He should be more careful, they were in public, and anyone could hear him. If you would like, we could stop for a quick snack. There are an assortment of options in the marketplace. No, it's fine. I would prefer not to linger. She didn't even look tempted by the offer, which Dimitri couldn't help but find odd. Byleth usually jumped at the opportunity to eat something good. Is something wrong? Dimitri is now worried about her out-of-character behavior. Byleth isn't even looking at him, instead focusing on the people surrounding them. Considering her job, that makes sense, but her focus seems more intense than he'd expect. The people are keeping a respectful distance and the knights accompanying them are ensuring no one gets too close. What could she be so wary of? I said I was fine. Bewildered, Dmitri nodded and continued walking. What was going on? As they continued walking, Dmitri paid more attention to Byleth out of the corner of his eye. She was keeping him in sight but was determinedly looking forward. It was almost like she was trying to ignore something. So, something was bothering her. Since Byleth clearly had no intentions of telling him what was wrong, he'd have to try and figure it out on his own. Dmitri slowed down his pace a bit, so he could better take in his surroundings. There were a lot of people watching them, but that was to be expected. It cannot just be that. Byleth never liked being the center of attention, but there has to be more to it. Regardless, his beloved seems subdued, and Dmitri does not care for it. Even if she's not especially happy, he'd hoped she'd at least be at ease. Byleth should be able to feel comfortable in his home. Now that he was paying more attention, Dmitri noticed that the people were doing more than staring. Again, not too surprising, but as he passes by, Dmitri can make out some of the whispering. Who is she? She looks like a mercenary. Why is a mercenary walking with King Dmitri? Who does she think she is? Mercenaries are opportunistic, she's trying to take advantage of him. She's going to try to assassinate him. Dmitri stopped listening after that. It made him feel sick. He realizes the two of them might look odd from the outside, but Byleth has done nothing to garner such accusations. No wonder she did not wish to stop to get food. Byleth had likely been listening the entire time. Dmitri feels disappointed in himself. He should have been paying better attention. Dmitri stopped glaring. You'll only start more rumors. Byleth still wasn't looking at him. People were always going to talk. They've been talking since we got here. Getting upset about it will not accomplish anything good. People have been talking. He knew they garnered stares when they dined together, and nobles had been insinuating things to him during meetings, but he hadn't thought much of it. The nobility of Faerghus had long since had a dim view of mercenaries. Byleth cast him a confused look. I am reasonably certain the maids think we are lovers. Dmitri feels his entire face flush. But we haven't. I haven't even gone near your room. Was this why Byleth never let him escort her back at night? The facts don't matter. People like scandals, so they'll make things up if it seems even a little plausible. Byleth still looked a bit confused. Have you really not heard any of the whispers going around the castle? Now that she mentions it, that is strange. No, but perhaps the servants and the like are avoiding speaking of such things within my earshot. They are probably worried about disrespecting him and losing their jobs. Still, he should be more aware of his surroundings. He really was a wretch to have missed so much that was right in front of him. Dmitri shook his head to clear it of negative thoughts. Getting angry at the servants would not help. He needed to continue with his current task and deal with everything else later. I am sorry that I was not more aware and therefore unable to help you deal with it. Byleth shook her head. It's fine, king or not, you are just human. You cannot know everything that is going on, especially in a castle. Byleth picked up her pace to walk closer to him. Don't beat yourself up over it. I could have told you and chose not to. Now, let's get to that church so we can head back and have lunch. She sighed, maybe we could work on your reach after. The last thing we need is for you to miss an opponent when one is charging at you on the battlefield because you misjudged the distance. Dmitri couldn't help but laugh. A fine plan indeed. Chapter 28, Exploring the City. The local church is smaller than Byleth expected. Dmitri had gone further into the building and encouraged her to explore. So here she is, wandering around aimlessly. There's a cathedral in a different part of the city, but she still expected the local church house to be more somehow. With how devout Faerghus is, she assumed the church to be large and grand. While it is by no means small and ugly, it is much simpler than she thought it would be. Faerghus has never been as opulent as the Adrestia, or even Leicester. In light of that, a more simplistic design makes sense. True. Still, the nobility would go to the cathedral, while the common folk would come here. There are more common folk than nobility, so she expected the church house to be bigger or something. It wasn't a bad-looking church. The pews were arranged neatly and appeared to be well made, and the whole place looked clean. Byleth hadn't been in many churches before, so she wasn't sure what the usual standard was. Considering what she knows now, Byleth supposes it makes sense. Her father did not want her associated with the church at all. He was probably afraid of word somehow getting back to Rhea of her existence. Gerald had been very well known as a captain of the Knights of Syros, so it wasn't unreasonable to fear being recognized by the clergyman. She goes to sit in one of the pews. Byleth wishes he had told her, if not everything, then parts of his background. She knows he was just trying to protect her. Byleth is keenly aware that she has always been his top priority. Keeping her ignorant of how Fodlan worked and some of the potential dangers, she could not understand though. When he died, Byleth had gotten some answers, but not nearly enough. She remembers feeling so uncertain about what to do. Gerald had told her not to trust Rhea, but everyone else seemed to have a vastly different opinion. Given that Rhea had been, oddly interested in her, Byleth had felt wary, but she had always wondered what exactly happened. Even now Gerald had told Dimitri when they were hired that he wanted to avoid seeing Rhea. Byleth knows Rhea isn't a terrible person, but like everyone she did have a dark side. Executions without a trial, executing Ash's adopted brother for a crime he didn't commit to cover up a different issue, sending the Blue Lions to take care of Lord Lonato's rebellion. A rebellion formed from civilians. There's also the possible fate she had in store for you. Yes. That. I have no idea what my daughter could be thinking, if she is my daughter after all. Regardless of the situation, I would never want the price for my resurrection to be another's life. Especially if that life was unwilling or a child. You were a literal newborn, the mere thought. Despite what her father thinks, they cannot hide from Rhea forever. Especially since Byleth does not want to keep Suthies from her remaining family forever. I don't want to do anything that would put you in danger. You are far more important to me than a possible family I cannot remember. Byleth appreciates that, especially since they will be going to Garreg Mach soon. She doesn't feel ready to see Rhea. At least all the clergymen are giving her a wide berth. If they tried to strike up a conversation about their religion, Byleth isn't sure what she could say. It's not like she's ever been a believer in the Church of Syros. Which is rather funny given our connection. It didn't start that way, but her relationship to the goddess kind of makes being a believer even more difficult. Byleth knows Suthies, she considers the goddess to be her closest friend. She cannot see her as an all-seeing all-knowing goddess. Suthies berates her for being stupid and complains about being bored. Suthies is a gremlin, not an ethereal being beyond her understanding. I suppose that makes sense. Though I do have to wonder why everyone insisted you become the archbishop before. Byleth wasn't sure either. Helping to run things during a war was one thing, but after, Byleth hadn't exactly been thrilled with the honor she was given. Seath and other high-ranking church officials had still been giving her lessons by the time they invaded Shamhala. The only good thing that came out of it was how it could make marrying Dimitri easier, but even then they still couldn't make their relationship public knowledge. I wonder, do you suppose Rhea wanted you in the position in hopes that I would eventually appear? If so, things might not have ended well when she realized that would never happen. That could be possible, but Byleth is more inclined to think that Rhea was weak and saw Byleth as the closest thing to Suthies she would get. Not exactly a confidence boost, but Byleth isn't sure if Rhea ever saw her as an individual person. If Rhea really is Syros, and even if she isn't, I cannot condone such a thing. You are a person with thoughts, feelings, and dreams of your own. To treat you as a mere vessel for someone long deceased. Suthies' voice is shaking. I promise you, Byleth, I will never take your body from you. With permission, I may brow it in important situations, but nothing more. That is comforting to hear. I don't even know why a religion was made in my name. I never wanted to be worshipped. Even the Nabateans revered me and placed me on a pedestal. Suthies gave a mirthless chuckle. I suppose that might be the roots of my affection for you. You always treated me as a person, even after we discovered I was the progenitor goddess. Byleth loves Suthies but knows her too well to ever put her friend on a pedestal. Ha! You enjoy my witty commentary. Byleth cannot deny that. She would get lonely without Suthies around. Excuse me, miss, do you need anything? Byleth looks up and sees an old priest next to the pew she is sitting in. No, I am just waiting for King Dimitri to finish so we can move on to our next destination. The priest smiles as her. Well, if you need something please let me know, you are the king's guest after all. Thank you. Instead of leaving, the priest surprisingly stays. Have you been in many churches before? No. Why is he still here? Most people rush to get away from her, even if they do not know she is the Ashen Demon. I did not really grow up around the church. We had to travel a lot because of my father's work. Are you not a follower of the Church of Sirios? He didn't look offended, but Byleth knows how important the church is to Faerghus. Byleth shook her head. While I do agree with some of the church's doctrines, I have never considered myself a believer of the religion. The priest nodded in understanding. Given your upbringing, that is not too surprising, especially if your father's work to you outside of Faerghus. He took a seat on the pew behind her. In my opinion, one of the important things about any religion is that people choose to believe in it. Despite what other devout followers may think, not believing in the Church of Sirios does not make someone evil. If one can find the right path on their own, I find that commendable. Most people need guidance for one reason or another. Byleth had never heard a member of the church talk like that. I find it rather refreshing. Dimitri felt more relaxed as they left the church. All the clergymen that had been present had been polite and hadn't said a negative word about Byleth. They had been surprised he had come to visit them instead of their more important members at the main cathedral, and while he did intend to go there next, the clergymen in this smaller space would likely be more in touch with the common people. They would have better insight on what people truly needed. Byleth, we have one more stop to make before we go back. She looked at him curiously. I thought that was the last stop. It originally was, but I fear I may inadvertently insult those in the cathedral if they are not included. Truthfully, he despises pandering to people like this, but he cannot afford to nurture any ill will right now. I assure you, it will only be a quick stop. You're the client, I'll follow either way. Not the most reassuring answer, but Dimitri supposes beggars cannot be choosers. He should be grateful for any time Byleth grants him with. Dimitri leads them through some back streets. He has no desire to subject Byleth to the marketplace again, until they reach the cathedral steps. As they begin to walk up towards the entrance, he cannot help but sneak glances at Byleth. Naive as it may be, he hopes that she likes how the cathedral looks. Traditionally, it is either here or in Garreg Mach that the royalty of Faerghus marry. If things work out the way Dimitri desperately hopes they will, this could very well be where he and Byleth. She would look truly lovely in white. No, he's getting ahead of himself again. Even if he does manage to convince Byleth of their mutual love, Dimitri is not certain if either of them is ready for that kind of step yet. So much needs to be taken care of. Her father needed to be consulted, the people of Faerghus needed to have a high opinion of her, and Byleth needs to be comfortable with all that being his wife entails. That's not even considering all the growing he and his beloved need to do. Dimitri knows he is expected to get married. He is king and the last of the Bladdids, at least that he knows of for certain. He needs to pass on his crest and bloodline. He has other plans for his future, but Dimitri has no intention of abandoning his kingdom or people. He needs to give them stability and hope for the future before he can withdraw from it all and share Byleth's long lifespan should she want that too. Still, being in the place where they could possibly. Dimitri can feel his blush spread. Is something the matter? Byleth's voice jolts him back to the present. Your face is all red. It is nothing. I am fine. Thank you for worrying about me. Dimitri nearly winces. That was not subtle. While she doesn't look like she believes him, Byleth thankfully does not press the issue. Dimitri has always had mixed feelings about the cathedral. It was a beautiful place to be sure, but as a child he always dreaded going to it. The services were boring, and he would have much preferred to remain at the castle to train or play. Even now, Dimitri wishes he did not have to come. He is king though and must fulfill his responsibilities, regardless of his personal feelings. Dmitri wishes Byleth had stayed with him, but she had opted to keep her distance, claiming it was so she could watch the room better. It does not take long for a bishop to meet with him. "Thank you for coming, Your Majesty. We are honored to have you here." The bishop bowed. "What can we do for you?" "I've been traveling throughout the city, looking into things. Thankfully everything seems to be in order so far. Is the cathedral in need anything?" The bishop smiles at that. "Well, now that you ask, we could use some repairs. We've maintained things as well as we can, but with the war, supplies and materials are not as plentiful." The bishop gestured around them. "Most things need at least a bit of upkeep." Dmitri glances around but cannot see anything damaged or broken. "Now that you are here, King Dmitri, there is something that we have been wondering." At Dmitri's nod, the priest continues. "Have you put any thought yet into your future marriage?" "What? I know with the war, marriage is likely not high on your list of priorities or likely to happen anytime soon, but we working in this fine cathedral feel that when that auspicious day does arrive, the event should be held here." The bishop looked excited at the prospect. In these difficult times, having your future wedding in Fhirdiad could help boost the people's morale. While that is true, and Dmitri had just been fantasizing about that exact thing, now is not the time for such a discussion. "I thank you for your counsel, but I will not be getting married in the near future. It's not like Byleth is currently open to the idea." Not that Dmitri can blame her, Fhirdiad hasn't exactly given her a warm welcome. If things work out between them, he and Byleth might have to wait to get married until after they distance themselves from society. Not the outcome he'd like, but it is still a possibility. The future queen will of course be a woman of a suitable rank who is a devout follower of the Church of Syros, as has long been tradition. The priest chuckles. Neither should be difficult to find in Faerghus. Byleth is neither of those things, so Dmitri doesn't know how to respond. As they silently make their way back towards his childhood home, Dmitri's mind turns back towards the rumors Byleth mentioned to him earlier. He's not sure if he should let them be or stop them. Calling attention to them might inadvertently lend what's being said more credibility but could still stop them. At the same time, many likely don't take them truly seriously, so they could die down on their own. It could also get people used to the idea of Byleth, which is something Dmitri would like. That would probably just upset her though. They have enough relationship issues as it is, and he doesn't want any more added to the pile. Either way, they will be leaving for the monastery soon. Hopefully their time together will have some kind of positive effect. It is becoming increasingly difficult to not touch her. Byleth is often standing next to him or sitting near him, and Dmitri keeps catching himself reaching for her hand or moving to brush her bangs out of her eyes. It's not fair to Byleth though, she has made her thoughts clear, and he already constantly calls her beloved in private against her wishes. Dmitri just yearns for things to be simpler between them. That they could just be a couple in love and not a king and mercenary with a chasm between them. They will be leaving Fhirdiad soon, and Byleth cannot say she is set to go. She has not enjoyed the cold weather or reception. The servants have remained polite, but the nobles are not doing much to hide their suspicions of her. Byleth doesn't really care, but it was grating after a while. It'll be nice to leave for the warmer weather around Gareg Mach, where she'll just be an anonymous mercenary that's part of the king's encourage. Dmitri had done something after their day out. While the whispers that seemed to follow her everywhere had never completely stopped, they had noticeably quieted. Byleth liked knowing what people were thinking but appreciates the break. The servants were still oddly interested whenever they came across her and Dmitri, but it was harmless enough. Hopefully, the rumors won't start up again at the monastery. The last thing they need is word of her in any capacity getting back to the archbishop. Fhirdiad wasn't all bad, the food had been good, but the walls were beginning to feel like they were closing in on her. It'll be nice to be on the road again. She just has to last through one more trip and she can return to her father. Given their last stop on this journey, he is probably extremely worried. Byleth would like to send him a letter reassuring him that she will avoid Rhea, but that would likely lead to questions she cannot answer. The trip to Gareg Mach is, thankfully, uneventful. Byleth had avoided him more than he would like, but Dmitri thought an hour away from his beloved was too long, so he's probably not the best judge. Unfortunately, they do not spend much time together while at the monastery either. Dmitri is spending most of his time in meetings with Lady Rhea and other higher-ranked officials of the church, while Byleth is doing her best to stay away from the archbishop. She told him one morning as she walked off that she was afraid of the archbishop trying to take her. Given the circumstances, Dmitri cannot fault Byleth for this fear. Byleth was made into the vessel of the goddess, and he shudders to think about what Lady Rhea's original plans for Byleth were. She was an infant at the time, which just adds another level of horror to the situation. Even after Byleth was a grown woman, Lady Rhea still had plans. He cannot help but wonder what the archbishop wanted to happen when his beloved sat on the throne back before everything had gone wrong. Lady Rhea said Byleth would hear a revelation from the goddess, but Dmitri fears that might not have been completely accurate. He fully supports Byleth staying out of sight. While he would love to spend more time with her, Byleth's safety is more important. The fact of the matter is that they don't know what exactly Lady Rhea would want from Byleth, and even Suthies is worried. At least he still spends time with Byleth. They still take meals together and have the occasional spar, and he thoroughly enjoys both activities at his beloved's side. They will not be in Gareg Mach for long, so it's not like Byleth has to keep out of sight forever. Dmitri did leave her a message requesting she meet him at the Goddess Tower. He's been thinking long and hard about everything Byleth has said to him, and he wants to try talking everything out with her and hopefully come up with some sort of plan. They've tried this multiple times already, but he's hoping that given their history with the location, things might be different this time. The what-ifs and unspoken opinions have been waiting on them both. Perhaps now that they've both aired all their grievances to the other, a change can be made. Chapter 29, The Goddess Tower. Dmitri feels incredibly nervous. The last time he remembers setting foot in the Goddess Tower was when he proposed. At the time he was honestly expecting rejection. Even if he was about to be crowned king, he had always felt unworthy of his beloved. So much has changed since then, yet how he views the both of them has barely shifted. Dmitri has been a king for years and Byleth has never been anything other than a mercenary. Despite that, he still thinks that she is far above him. Byleth is a genuinely good and kind person. She might have trouble expressing herself, but she truly, deeply cares about people. Dmitri, on the other hand, he is well aware that he is a bore. He does not deserve anything good in life, but Byleth does. Dmitri knows he is undeserving of having someone as wonderful as Byleth at his side, but he knows he could make her happy. Being in the Goddess Tower again has only strengthened that feeling. Byleth did not give up on him when he was at his worst. In this very spot she held out her hand to him while he threatened and snarled at her. She never stopped reaching out. Dmitri can give her nothing less. He just needs to keep his wits about him. His beloved is much smarter than him and is very stubborn. Dmitri is stubborn too and is determined to find a path towards a happy future for them both. As time drags on, Dmitri cannot help but feel nervous. What if Byleth doesn't come, either because she didn't receive his request or as an active choice? What if she does come and they end up fighting again? Dmitri hates fighting with her, but her actions have been frustrating him to no end. What if Suthies inserts herself into the conversation? He appreciates the goddess's insights and knows that she and Byleth are very close, but this is a private matter. If Byleth wishes to divulge what they discussed later, that is one thing, but while they are talking, he would just prefer that it just be them. Dmitri wants to work things out with his beloved. He wants things to get better for them but is well aware that there are many obstacles in their way. Their time together in Fhirdiad made that abundantly clear. The rumors going around the castle, the comments from his advisors, what the bishop said. Dmitri had known most people would not support him being with a mercenary, but knowing and witnessing were two different things. Just getting married in general will be challenging. They cannot have the archbishop officiate and there will be an uproar in Fhirdiad because of Byleth's background. The nobles would feel slighted, and the common folk would probably be a mix of things. Some would be indifferent, others would see it as a sign that people of more humble beginnings could move up in the world, and there would likely be people who would believe Byleth bewitched or coerced him somehow. He is more aware than ever that what he wants will not be easily gained. Despite that, Dmitri loves Byleth and will not give up so easily. With Suthies asleep for the night, Byleth made her way to the Goddess Tower. It was relaxing to walk openly after spending the day ducking behind corners. She'd been spending most of her free time in the abyss, gathering information and looking at the available supplies. Aelfric hadn't made an appearance and she's not sure how to feel about that. Byleth wasn't sure what to think when she found Dimitri's note, but not going to the Goddess Tower did not feel like an option. She did not want to hurt Dimitri, and Byleth did feel like they should talk without risk of being overheard. They both likely had things they needed to say. It did not take her long to reach the top of the tower. There were so many memories, both bad and good. This is where they made their wishes on the night of the ball, where they reunited after 5 years, where they got engaged. It is a bittersweet place. One that carried so much meaning for both of them. Unsurprisingly, Dimitri was already there when she arrived. At the sight of her, his face lit up with a smile. You made it. Did he think she would ignore his request? Given her past behavior, probably. What is it that you want to discuss, and why here? They both would have had to sneak into the tower. It is only open to the public one day a year after all. Though Byleth supposes exceptions can be made when the king is involved. Dimitri gently took her hand and led her farther into the tower. I would like to give discussing our relationship another try. The Goddess Tower seemed appropriate given our history with it. I thought even if we only discuss things we've already gone over, between the location and our current mindsets, things might go better this time. He hesitated for a moment. Please do not worry, I have no intentions of proposing right now. Byleth hadn't considered that, but given their current location, she can see why Dimitri is worried about her coming to that conclusion. I am well aware that now is not the time for such things. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. However, my feelings and hopes for our futures have not changed. I want to respect you though, you deserve nothing less. I know you've told me you do not know whether you love me or not anymore, but don't you want to find out? If you become certain you do not love me or that you do not want all that comes with being queen, I will back off. I just want us to have a chance at finding out one way or another. This again. You've asked me this before, and as much as I wish I had a different answer, I don't. Why can't things ever be easy? I just don't know anymore. I don't know if what either of us feel is romantic love any longer. Even if I was certain, there are still so many other factors. Byleth isn't sure if she's happy that Suthies is asleep and not giving a running commentary, or said that her friend isn't here to offer support. None of our issues have been resolved, and I do not care for many of the decisions you've been making lately. How he handled Edelgard stands out in her mind. I also cannot say I'm thrilled with the idea of constantly being ridiculed and judged by the nobles for my lesser birth. Ironic as that is, given she is the literal vessel for the goddess. Byleth gently removes her hand from his and goes to lean against a wall. She did not particularly enjoy her time in Fhirdiad, and that was just a small taste of what her life would be like as his queen. It wasn't a horrible experience, but it wasn't a fun one either. I don't care about what price I have to pay. Dimitri looks at her pleadingly. We love each other and have given so much so that those around us can be safe. He walks over to where she is standing. We deserve the chance to be happy together. Why must he be so single-minded? Byleth is silent for a moment, before answering. I just don't know if what you're asking for is a good idea. How can she make Dimitri understand? He's listening to her words but doesn't seem to comprehend them. Our lives have been so different from each other. Even if we are in love, can we really be happy together if we define happiness differently? Dimitri's eyes widen. Also, what price will you be paying? I can only see sacrifices I would have to make. She would have to give up her lifestyle, she would have to subject herself to ridicule, she would be forced to continue to look at people who are no longer the ones she loves. Besides Dimitri and Suthies, Byleth would have no friends or allies. She would be isolated and alone. In contrast, Dimitri's life would continue as has been, with the only difference being her continued presence, something he has made abundantly clear he wants. The silence is deafening. Byleth moves again, so they can both have some breathing room. She then looks Dimitri square in the eyes. What kind of life do you want for us? I want us both to be abundantly clear about everything, all cards on the table and all that. They attempted to discuss all this before, and Byleth does not want to have this conversation again. Byleth is correct. They should put everything out in the open and stop holding back opinions and feelings. It has done them no good so far, and Dimitri wants them to finally get past this. Based on what Byleth told him before, he might even have some rudimentary solutions. There are many things I'd like to happen, so please forgive me if I ramble. At her nod, Dimitri continues, I'd like to find a way to make my lifespan match yours. We could live in Fhirdiad while I get things sorted out until we need to disappear. He couldn't just abandon his people, he needed to make sure Faerghus was taken care of. While I reign as king, we can still be together. As I know you would find sitting around the castle boring, you could start teaching again. The Fhirdiad School of Sorcery would be honored to have you, or you could help train the knights. They could both keep busy. I want to give citizens more rights and power, so I might not even need to figure out who would be king after I step down. Should that not come to pass, I could leave the throne to one of my uncle's illegitimate children if any can be found. I am sure one could be trained for the position. Once Faerghus was taken care of, they could focus on each other. After that, I am not sure, I will be happy as long as we are together. We can go somewhere we won't be recognized, and just live our lives. It would be tricky to find a place to go where people won't realize who he is, but they will age so slowly that it shouldn't be too long before people wouldn't suspect a thing. They will probably have to move around a lot, but Byleth has always enjoyed traveling. It is how she grew up after all. Should they decide to have children, they could do that as well. I just want us to be together. I know it will not be easy, and I doubt I realize the full ramifications of my desires, but I want no one else. Dimitri longs to take her hand, but refrains. As selfish as it is, I want no one but you. He doesn't think he could bear another's touch. Dimitri begins to pace. It frustrates me that you don't seem to want to try and work things out. I don't think we've changed so much that we are no longer compatible, though I do admit we do not know each other as well as we once did. It's not like that cannot be easily remedied. If we spend time together, I am sure those particular doubts will be dispelled. He halts his pacing to approach her. We've already done a bit of that on this trip. If we could just find more ways to spend time together off the battlefield, I'm sure at least some of your worries will diminish. They don't even have to do anything major. Just regularly sharing meals and going on expeditions would be enough. I know that the nobility of Faerghus will not easily accept you, but I will not insult either of us by suggesting you be my mistress instead of my wife. The mere thought of putting his beloved in such a position was revolting. She is not a secret to be locked away and deserves the utmost respect. I'd much prefer we find a way to silence most of the whispers. I love you and I want to fight for you. Dimitri can only hope that is enough. That he is enough. Byleth is the vessel of the goddess and one of the most wonderful people in all of existence. She could do much better than a wretch like him. Still, he desperately hopes his affections are still strongly returned. That is all I can think to say. Now please share your thoughts. Thank you for your honesty. Byleth looked tired. I appreciate you not holding back. I understand your frustrations and apologize for adding to them. Byleth puts a hand on her chin. I am not exactly enthused about living a life I would find boring at best. I'm a warrior, not a lady. She shakes her head. I could never be happy lounging about in your castle, and teaching again, I don't know. I'm trying to move on from my former life and find a new normal. She looks at him. You keep saying you want a life with me, but you have such a narrow and vague view of what that means. Now Byleth begins to pace. We are two very different people with very different upbringings, and that combined with you clinging to who we used to be, makes me feel like you're trying to shove me into a box. Things cannot ever go back to the way they were, and we cannot move forward until you accept that. Byleth runs a hand through her hair. You say you want to give more power to the people, but from the outside it looks like you're consolidating power. Is that how it looks? Yes, he's taking over Empire territory little by little, and instilling kingdom citizen in those areas. Dimitri does admit to putting people he trusts in charge of the territories of the former Western lords, something he cannot remember planning to do before. Maybe from an outside point of view, it does look like he's consolidating power. It is not as if Byleth has been privy of his planning or strategy meetings. Before we invaded Shamhala, you were working on ways to eventually step down as king and do away with the monarchy entirely. Not because you wanted to be immortal with me, we didn't even know about that back then, but because you honestly thought it was better for the people. Dmitri hadn't known that. I know you don't remember that, and I am not holding you to that standard. Things are different now, and we must adapt. With the way the war is going this time, it very well might not be a good idea for this generation, though I am happy to hear you have similar plans now. Byleth walks over and puts a hand on his shoulder. Dmitri wishes he could feel its warmth through his armor. So why are you? Because the people we individually fell in love with no longer exist. Parts of them remain, but that is not the same. She squeezes his shoulder. How can you say you love me when you don't know me anymore? Not really. Byleth moves to lean against the wall again. I am afraid, Dmitri. There are so many what-ifs going around in my head. What if we are just clinging to the only people who know what's happened? What if I make you like me, and we only last as a couple for a short period of time? What if your lifespan cannot be extended? What if we eventually find that we simply want different things out of life? Byleth is silent a moment before continuing. It hurts to be around the others now, and if you and I got married that would not change. Even ignoring that, will you be able to handle abandoning them, Rodrigue, and everyone you know? We cannot simply go around and tell everyone you are close to that I am the vessel of the goddess and made it so that you will live for millennia. Dmitri hadn't considered that. When she was still the professor, they could have told everyone, but now. I am afraid I do not know how to respond. That was a lot to take in. Dmitri knew how upset about everything Byleth was but hadn't considered all the things they both would have to give up. I don't know how I want you to respond. I just know the path we are currently on may not lead to either of us being happy. She looks at him imploringly. I want both of us to be happy, I'm just not certain that we share an opinion on what happiness entails. If something doesn't change and we do become a couple again, I fear it will lead to resentment, and I don't want that for either of us. Would they come to resent each other? Dmitri cannot imagine ever resenting his beloved, though he supposes thousands of years is a lot of time. Anything could happen. I'm sure we can figure something out. I can prove myself and show you. You shouldn't have to prove yourself, neither of us should. We should just want to be together. Byleth's gaze travels around their surroundings. We are not an arrangement or agreement. When we got engaged last time it was because we simply loved each other. That is true, before it was rather simple. Dmitri loved Byleth, so he proposed. Byleth loved him back, so she said yes. It all sounds so easy. You are correct, and I want us to get back to that place. The only question is how. That's why I want us to spend more time together, it's the only way I can see us moving forward. Before Byleth could respond, they heard the echoes of footsteps. Is anyone up there? Someone must have heard them. Thinking quickly, Dmitri took Byleth's hand and huddled them against a wall away from the windows to hide them in the shadows. Hopefully, they will not be caught. A knight of Siros enters through the doorway with a torch. Come out, I know you're there. The next few seconds are agonizing as they wait. It's such a shame, Dmitri actually gets to hold the love of his life and he cannot even properly enjoy it. I guess I was just hearing things. With that the knight left. We should probably head to bed now. I'd also really prefer not to get caught. Byleth moved her head off his chest and began making for the exit. Besides, I'm sure you'll have to get up early for something. She even honored him with a small smile. Byleth did have a good point, Dmitri had many important things to do once the sun rose. More importantly, Byleth needed to remain out of Lady Ria's sight. Getting caught by someone in a place she wasn't supposed to be wouldn't help with that. Before we go, I would like to say one more thing. A request if you will. Byleth tilted her head to the side. What is it? We have both heard each other out now. I have offered up a suggestion on how to get around one of your worries. Spending leisure time together will not be easy, but he is certain doing so will help Byleth figure out her emotions. I remember your previous grievances and will take into account everything you've said tonight while I think about potential solutions. He still doesn't know what to do about his friends. All I ask is that you keep an open mind and consider ideas of your own. Even if you don't think they'll work, they could be a good starting point if we put our heads together. His beloved was silent for a moment. I guess that's fair. Dmitri smiles and approaches Byleth. Thank you. He takes her hand, making sure to do so slowly so she could pull away, and kisses the back of it. I appreciate it. Byleth quickly turns her face away. It's a good start. Chapter 30, Secrets and Lies. Like their past serious conversations about their relationship, Dmitri has a lot to consider when it came to what he and Byleth talked about in the Goddess Tower. All their discussions provided valuable information, now he just needs to do something with it all. Dmitri must also consider the reality of their situation. Not only do they have a lot of challenges to overcome, but they do not have forever to do so. Geralt's mercenaries are not going to remain with him forever. Eventually their contract will be up, and when they leave, Byleth goes with them. Dmitri needs to make some headway with his beloved before that happens. At the same time, he's still taking in all that she said. While he had already acknowledged some differences in behavior on both their parts, Dmitri did not think either of them had changed that much. Byleth did not seem to share that opinion. It would explain why Byleth was so upset about Edelgard. Even if Byleth was completely on the mark, they should be able to overcome it. People changed all the time, that alone shouldn't end a relationship. Dmitri still believes that if they just spent some leisurely time together, Byleth would see that they were still compatible. It wasn't just that though, there was also the fact that Byleth doesn't think he can give her a happy life. Dmitri should have realized from the beginning that living in luxury wouldn't be something she desired. He was inconsiderate to have not thought of that from the start, and how hollow some of his original pleas must have sounded to her. What hurts the most is how utterly oblivious he's been to her struggle with the others. He was with them the entire time, they grew and changed at his side, so it isn't surprising he hadn't noticed. He still should have realized what was going on though. They were not the people Byleth knew, and sadly they did not think much of her. Dmitri cannot remember Felix ever trying to spar with her. That was once one of his favorite things to do. Looking back, when he invited her to things, no one really interacted with her beyond politeness. While his friends could have been more welcoming, Byleth hadn't exactly made her situation any easier. She never really reached out to the others, nor did it seem like she had put real thought into solutions for their relationship problems. She just knew what wouldn't work and stopped thinking about it. Their love was worth fighting for, so he was relieved that Byleth had agreed to at least think about things. They both knew the other's worries and desires, now they needed to do something about it. Dmitri feels like after so long, he and his beloved are finally on the same page. No hidden concerns, no secret plans, they had both been open and honest. He finally feels more than optimism and hope. Things will never be perfect, and perhaps Byleth might never officially be his queen, but that does not matter. As long as they can be together, Dmitri would never long for anything else. Byleth had just finished getting some training in when she caught sight of the Archbishop. The woman was locked in a discussion with someone and thankfully hadn't noticed Byleth's presence. "What are you doing, you fool? Move before she looks up." Byleth immediately ran down the pathway and ducked into the first room she came across. Well, that was a close call. No kidding. Byleth does not want to be seen quite yet. We can't hold off on that forever. If she really is your daughter. I know. I can't do it now. My thoughts and emotions are a jumbled mess when it comes to her. Suthies leaned against Byleth's side. If we confront Rhea, I can only see two basic outcomes. One is that no one believes you and you are executed for being a heretic. The second is that you are believed, leading to you being taken by the church and placed on a pedestal. Suthies shuddered. You will be seen as the goddess reborn and trapped in a gilded cage. I like neither outcome. Byleth is inclined to agree. There is also the risk that Rhea will try to have me sit on the throne again. I'm not sure I want to see her reaction when you do not take over my body. I remember her darker tendencies towards betrayals, potential or otherwise. Byleth is still angry that Rhea forced students to put down a rebellion, all to show them the consequences of turning on the church. She'll never forget Ash's heartbroken face. That was an unsettling monthly mission, to be sure. It is then that Byleth looks around the room they rushed into. This was our room. Suthies sounds as surprised as Byleth feels. It looks exactly the same, like nothing has changed. The bed, desk, bulletin board, all is how she remembers it. Of course, it all looks the same, you never altered or decorated the room. That is accurate. It's not like Byleth had anything to decorate with. She never got over the mercenary mindset, which required one to only own what could be carried on their back. The only larger thing she really acquired was the tea set from Ferdinand. It was something she used often, generally with Dimitri. If you do not mind me saying, I am glad that you and the boy spoke about things again. I know talking about emotions and all that is related to them is not easy for you. Thank you. Byleth went to sit on her former bed. I'm just not sure what to do next. Dimitri and I have spoken about our issues before, and while I'm happy that it finally feels like everything is out in the open, I'm just not sure what our next move could be. Byleth moves to lay down on the bed. I'm not even sure what I want the outcome to be. I don't know if I still love Dimitri, or if my emotions are a result of me clinging to the one person, outside of you, who remembers everything. She curls up. I'm not good at any of this. I couldn't even go up to the others and start a conversation. I just don't know how to do that. For most of my life it was just me and Geralt. Everyone else was unsettled by me, so I never saw the point of reaching out. Then we came here and at first interactions were a matter of business. Things just grew from there. I have an idea if you do not mind. Suthies sat next to Byleth. I will ask you some questions and you are to answer as honestly as you can. Saying you don't know is fine. All right. Suthies knows her better than anyone after all. The first question should be easy, do you like spending time with the boy? Sometimes. Elaborate please. I can usually enjoy myself when he's not overtly trying to steer things in a romantic direction, but Dimitri typically does try to do that. Byleth sits up. It just gets frustrating when he puts me in that position. When he doesn't though, it's relaxing, and I usually enjoy myself. A fair thing to be frustrated by, you should respect each other's opinions. Now moving on. Do you dislike who he is now? You are very aware that both of you have changed over the years, but do you still like the boy as a person? Byleth is silent for a moment. I do not like all the changes he's gone through. How he's chosen to handle Adrestia and Edelgard bother me. The man I fell in love with was open and kind, and while Dimitri is still kind at his core, he's so much colder in demeanor now. Byleth shakes her head. He still cares deeply about people, and I would not call him a cruel man, but he is also not the warm kind person I once knew. Dimitri has always had issues on the battlefield, but sometimes I look now and the smile I see on his face. Byleth is afraid that if she looks too deeply, she will find even more changes that she does not care for. Sometimes I look at him and it's like nothing has changed, we are both happy and content and then one of us says or does something and the differences become stark again. It can be painful to realize she's slipping into old habits. Okay, thank you for being honest. Here is your next question, can you imagine a good future at his side should things work out? I'm honestly not sure what a good future with him would entail, Byleth confesses. To me a good life is going wherever the work is good and eating tasty food. I don't want a lot, but Dimitri is different. He's used to more general security, more luxury, just more in general. Would you be able to stand watching him be with someone else? Let's say things don't work out and you go your separate ways. The boy is a king, eventually he will have to get married and have children. How would you feel at the eventual news of his wedding, of the birth of his children? It would hurt, but I cannot confidently say why. Byleth hugged her knees to her chest. Regardless of how I may feel now, I did love Dimitri in the past. Him moving on like that would always be painful. Byleth was being honest when she said she didn't know if she loved Dimitri or not. She knows she cares for him and does not want to see him hurt, but that's not an answer. The warmth he once made her feel has been replaced with uncertainty and fear. She doesn't like all the changes he's gone through, so who's to say that any further changing he does will be to her liking either. Dimitri should be whoever he really is, whatever that means. Repressing himself has never done him any favors. That doesn't mean Byleth is required to love, or even like who he becomes. She's not even sure why Dmitri is so adamant that he loves her. Byleth doesn't think she's been cruel to him, but she certainly hasn't been welcoming. She's denied him every chance she gets and has repeatedly refused to work with him. Most men would have given up long ago. But the boy is not most men. He is a persistent one. I doubt he will give up unless you prove without a doubt that a romantic relationship will never work. Suthies puts a hand on Byleth's shoulder. Both of you need to work for it if you are ever going to be together. Dmitri needs to do more than acknowledge that you are making valid points, something he is making strides towards. And you? You need to work with him to figure out how to deal with the obstacles, something you have resisted doing from the start. Byleth just wanted to spare them both pain. And that is admirable, but you know you care for the boy, you know news that he moved on would cause you pain. Explore what all that means with him. Work with Dmitri and see what happens. You are going to live for a very long time, Byleth. Do not set yourself up for regrets if you can avoid it. For the next few days, Byleth does her best to keep a low profile. Which unfortunately means, she doesn't venture out as often to spar or eat with him. Dmitri still sees her, but she was striving to remain in the shadows, out of sight and blended into the background. Sad as it makes him, Dmitri has no objections. He loves spending time with her, but Byleth can only dive under tables and into bushes so many times. Apparently, his beloved almost had a run-in with the Archbishop and he can understand wanting to be extra cautious. Lady Rhea is seemingly always around, and Dmitri understands why Geralt ran all those years ago on a new level. If she had been like this when Byleth was a baby, Dmitri cannot imagine how much that must have terrified the new and grieving father. It's like she's constantly watching, eagerly waiting for something. It might just be his paranoia, but it is exceedingly unsettling. He cannot help but wonder if she knows Byleth is here. Or perhaps suspects his relationship with the vessel of the goddess. He has no idea how such a thing would be possible, but it really is for the best that Byleth is keeping to the background. Her safety is more important than sharing a meal or spar. Rumors of the Ashen Demon and their connection have likely already spread to Garreg Mach. They don't need to draw any additional eyes. We should be able to keep pushing through Empire defenses. Dmitri gestured to a place on the map. The latest reports say there are not many troops stationed here. It shouldn't take very long for us to reach Inber after that. It will just be a matter of making sure we have enough supplies. He and Lady Rhea are having yet another meeting. She requested that they discuss the continued campaigns in the Empire and the push towards Inber. Once Inber is in our control, we can finally deal with that wretched girl. Lady Rhea looks downright vicious. It is a bit unsettling. Is this how he's been making Byleth feel? Dmitri does not think he's exhibited the same level of vitriol towards Edelgard since that horrible day on Gronder Field, but he did just leave her behind instead of helping. Edelgard was being controlled by those strange pale mages. Lady Rhea tensed at that. Even after I killed who appeared to be their leader, she was still showing the effects of the spell the last time I saw her. Lady Rhea's expression softens. We still need to continue our current course of action, but we can figure out what to do with her after Inber is ours and she is captured. They discuss potential routes and roads before the Archbishop began to look curious. There is something that I'd like to ask you, Your Majesty. Yes. I was wondering why you did not bring Eredbar with you. Lady Rhea adjusted one of the maps. I have also heard that you rarely carry it into battle. Dmitri had not expected that. I did leave it behind in Fhirdiad. The war has been hard on everyone, and I hoped leaving it in the kingdom capital would be a good moral boost for the people. His advisors had loved the idea. And concerning taking it into battle, my regular lances have been serving me well enough. Using it right now, just seems excessive. The truth is that he can barely look at the thing now. Ever since he and Byleth burned Blutgong in Morris's pyre, he has longed to do the same for the Nabatean who was used to make his abhorrent lance. Your strength and kindness are commendable, but remember that your hero's relic and crest are gifts from the goddess, and therefore should not be ignored. Dmitri feels sick. Maybe he should change the subject. I will keep that in mind. He smiled. How is rebuilding going? The monastery did take quite a bit of damage when we retook it. It is progressing quicker than expected, thank you. She looked at him carefully. By the way, while we were retaking Gareg Mach, I learned that you had hired a mercenary group run by the famed Blade Breaker. This is not where he'd hoped the conversation would go. I did. They are a skilled group and have been an excellent addition to my forces. He has to avoid lying as much as possible. That is good to hear. The Blade Breaker, Geralt Eisner, and I were once close, so it is good to know he's doing well. Lady Ria's gaze does not waver. I was told that among your entourage was a member of his mercenary company, the Ashen Demon, I believe. Can you tell me anything about her? From what I know, she's rather young. Perhaps she and Geralt have a connection. I cannot imagine him dragging a child into a mercenary's life lightly. Dimitri begins to feel fear creeping up his spine. I do not know much about her on a personal level. The Ashen Demon is an excellent sparring partner. I don't think I've ever seen someone so skilled with a sword, but she keeps to herself. Does the Archbishop suspect the Ashen Demon is Byleth Eisner? Could she know Byleth is the baby that was said to have died in that fire? If Lady Ria thinks that is the case, she will likely want to keep Byleth in Gareg Mach. It doesn't matter though, he will never hand his beloved over to the church. Byleth isn't sure why she's surprised to see Dimitri in the throne room, but she is. It hadn't been long since they met like this, but it's not like it's unprecedented. It's a little annoying. Byleth had been hoping for a proper rest after her day spent in the library. This is the only way we can really talk now. For once Dimitri did not look ecstatic to see her. He looked worried. I think Lady Ria may know about you. At the very least, she is suspicious. During our last meeting she asked some very pointed questions about you. Dimitri led her to the stairs so they could sit. I told her nothing substantial, but questions were still asked. Byleth is less afraid than she'd thought she'd be at the news. It's not surprising that Ria's caught on to something being up with me. I'm inclined to agree. It was truly only a matter of time. She just needed to stay out of sight until they left Gareg Mach. I think it might be best if Suthies and I spend the rest of our stay here in the Abyss. As a mercenary I should fit right in. Dimitri's face falls a bit. Are you sure? He grabs one of her hands. I do not like the idea of you being forced to hit underground. We will be fine, besides while down below we might find an opportunity to see Byleth's mother. Byleth hadn't considered that. She's not even sure if that's something she wants to do. The last time everything happened we didn't get a good look at the woman. If our theories are correct, my Creststone may have once dwelled within her. I think it only fair I pay my respects. If you say so, Dimitri says slowly. Just please be careful. If you are caught, the consequences could be severe. Byleth will make sure she's not caught if they go looking. Neither she nor Suthies are ready to face Ria. Besides, Byleth was eager to take a look at the Shadow Library. With Byleth spending all her time in Abyss, Dimitri has no excuses he can use to avoid dining with Lady Ria. It is at one shared dinner that he decides to broach the subject of the church's lies. He still doesn't know where their roots are or how far back they go. Lady Ria, I have a question if you do not mind. She puts down her utensils and looks at him. Please, feel free to ask me anything. I was just wondering if you think any of the church's teachings might have become warped as the result of time. He will have to approach the subject carefully. Lady Ria's face hardens for a fraction of a second. Dimitri might not have caught it if he wasn't looking. It is certainly possible. Time has a way of changing things. Lady Ria nods. That being said, I doubt any changes are substantial. Why do you ask? This could go very poorly if he does not word things delicately. History is recorded by the winners. My own advisors have been demonizing the Empire in their commentary, which I fear will make it into the history books. Dimitri fidgets slightly in his chair. I know Adrestia is not horrible as a whole. The citizens have been attacked by their government and I have recruited a number of important military personnel into my army. Ferdinand, who was still missing, was a good and noble person and he was very loyal to his country. They were not friends, but Dimitri knows he was a good man. I just don't want the good sides of the Empire to be forgotten. Life comes in shades of grey, and only seeing in black and white can blind you to so much. Byleth and the former Black Eagles students had been rather worried about their absent friend. The whole thing just got me thinking about things. What if the same thing happened in the War of Heroes? Lady Rhea smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Seeing things from that point of view is admirable, Your Majesty. However, I wouldn't worry about the subject, she laughs. The War of Heroes took place a millennium ago, any falsehoods have long been lost to time. Everyone who was around back then is long gone after all. I suppose you are correct. Dimitri knows this is wrong, but he shouldn't harp on it. He can't say more without giving himself away. He's not sure if Lady Rhea knows about the lies or not, but she doesn't seem to care for the subject either way. Dimitri will have to watch her carefully. Check the description for the links to the author.